The first time I wandered into the forest at twilight, the air was thick with fog, and each breath felt like it belonged to someone else. Pale light filtered through the skeletal trees, catching the edges of branches that twisted like fingers. There was a hush here, a silence that pressed against my chest, broken only by the soft rustling of unseen creatures. I remember tracing the path with hesitant steps, my shoes muffled against the damp earth. Somewhere in the distance, a faint humming drifted through the mist, almost like a lullaby sung by someone standing just beyond sight. Shadows moved where they shouldn't, stretching longer than they had any right to, and I could swear that the eyes watching me were not human. And then, just as I thought I was alone, I heard it. A soft, deliberate rustle behind me, a sound that didn't belong to any wind or animal. I froze. My heartbeat was loud in my ears, and the fog seemed to thicken, curling around me like a living thing. That's when I saw it. The forest stretched endlessly. Tall pines swayed, but the air was still. A fog curled at my ankles, soft and cold. It clung to my legs like it wanted to pull me down. I stepped forward. The needles underfoot whispered. A hum hovered somewhere above, indistinct, almost human. Then, a voice. Soft. My name, carried on a thread of wind I couldn't feel. I froze. The mist thickened. Shadows grew, bending around shapes I couldn't name. Every step forward was heavier than the last, as if the forest weighed my intentions. The pale light appeared far ahead. It shimmered between trunks, like moonlight through smoke. I blinked, and it was gone. I breathed in. The fog smelled damp, like moss and old bark. A chill moved across my shoulders. Something watched from the dark spaces between the trees. Soft footsteps, or my own echo? I could not tell. The forest made no promises. I reached for the light again. It flickered, and I saw a figure, tall, still. But when my eyes adjusted, it vanished. Only silence remained. The pines no longer swayed. The hum vanished. I was alone, or so I told myself, a rustling behind me. Slow, measured. I did not turn. My skin prickled. Every hair on my arm stood on end. The fog wrapped tighter around my legs. Each step sank slightly, and the earth seemed to sigh beneath me. A faint pulse of cold ran through the soles of my shoes. I tried to call out. Nothing came. My voice felt trapped inside my throat, dissolving into the thick mist. The pale light returned. It danced between the trees, a heartbeat in the darkness. I thought I saw it move closer. Or was it my mind reaching, stretching shapes out of nothing? A shadow slid across the path. No form, no sound, but I felt it. A weight pressing at the back of my neck. I stopped. The forest held its breath. I held mine too. Time stretched thin. Moments dripped like water, slow and cold. The whisper returned. Closer this time. A name drawn softly through lips I could not see. It wrapped around my ears, tight, tender, terrifying. I shivered. The fog licked my skin. The air smelled of damp pine and something metallic, like the memory of blood. I wanted to turn, but every instinct told me to move forward. Step by hesitant step, I followed the pale light. It shimmered again, just beyond the reach of my hands. A face? I thought I saw one. Pale. Hollow. Eyes too deep, pulling me closer. Then, nothing. The light flickered, vanished, and the forest exhaled. I was alone. Alone with my own pulse, echoing between trunks. The fog settled again, soft, thick, indifferent. A branch cracked, far away. Or was it near? I couldn't tell. I stopped walking. The whisper had gone. The hum was gone. Only the pines moved, slowly, almost lazily, in a wind that did not exist. I realized I could not remember how long I had been there. Minutes? Hours? The forest did not measure time. The fog began to lift slightly. I could see the ground beneath my feet, but the path I had taken was gone. Erased. As if it had never existed. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. But every direction looked the same. Endless trunks, endless fog. The whisper might return at any moment, and maybe I would answer. I took a slow, careful step. The fog closed behind me. The forest held its secrets, and I stepped deeper. The trail narrowed. Branches brushed my shoulders, leaving damp streaks on my arms. The fog pressed low to the ground. Each step sank slightly into wet earth. Leaves rustled behind me, soft, deliberate, like someone pacing just beyond reach. I stopped. The forest froze. Only the rustling continued. Closer now, yet still unseen. My own footsteps felt heavier. They thudded in time with the shifting shadows. I could feel the rhythm of another mirroring me, just out of sight. The path twisted again. I quickened my pace. The fog swirled around my ankles. It smelled of wet pine and moss, and something faintly metallic lingered, like old iron. A shadow stretched unnaturally across the path. I blinked, and it shifted, elongating, shrinking, as if the light itself could not decide its shape. I dared a glance behind me. Nothing. But the echo remained. Soft footsteps, measured, following. The trail bent sharply. I turned too quickly, and my heart caught in my throat. Branches scraped my face, leaving wet streaks. The rustling continued, never faltering, never stopping. I whispered my own name. Nothing answered. Only the echo of movement behind me. I slowed. My breath clouded in front of my face. The forest held its silence, but the footsteps kept their pace. A low hum hovered beneath the trees. I could not locate it. It was inside me, then outside, then gone. I tried to remember which way I had come. The path seemed to twist back on itself. Every tree looked the same. Every shadow pressed closer. I felt the cold reach of fog against my neck, a brush of something soft. Or was it my coat? I dared not look. The echoes of steps grew sharper. They matched mine exactly. Every pause, every shuffle, every uneven tread. I stopped completely. The forest froze, and still, behind me. The steps continued. A breeze whispered through the pines. It stirred the fog. It made the branches tremble, and I thought I saw movement, not shadow, not figure, but intention. I forced a step forward. The path twisted again. I stumbled slightly. The fog thickened, clinging to my legs, clinging to my senses. I could feel the presence behind me, closer now, pressing, but never revealing itself. It moved with patience, with quiet certainty. I tried to call out. My voice dissolved into the mist. Nothing returned, only the soft, measured steps. The trail narrowed even further. Branches arched overhead, forming a tunnel of shadow. The fog rose higher, and the forest seemed to bend inwards, listening. I paused again. The footsteps paused. A perfect, mirrored silence. Then a single leaf dropped behind me, sharp, crisp, alone in the muffled world. And the steps resumed. I could smell damp earth, pine, and that faint metallic trace again. It clung to the fog. To me. To the path I thought I knew. The path twisted back on itself once more. I realized I had not moved forward at all. I was running in circles, chasing an exit that did not exist. I slowed to a careful crawl. Every sense stretched to its limit. The forest seemed to breathe with me, its pulse matching mine, its silence magnifying the footsteps behind. I reached a bend. The fog lifted slightly. I could see the path ahead, still twisting, still uncertain. The footsteps stopped. I held my breath. I waited. And then, nothing. only fog, only trees, only the echo of my own pulse. I continued step by hesitant step. The rustling of leaves faded, the mirrored rhythm disappeared. But the forest did not forgive. It held its secrets tightly. I walked on, alone and not alone. The trail twisted endlessly, and the footsteps might return when I least expected them. The fog lingered low, clinging to my ankles. The forest smelled damp and earthy, with the faint tang of decay hidden beneath. A pale glow appeared ahead, soft, otherworldly, hovering just above the forest floor. It pulsed slowly, like it was breathing. Shapes flickered inside it, impossible to identify. They moved with the rhythm of the light, stretching and shrinking without reason, without form. I approached carefully. Each step left a depression in the moist earth. My fingers brushed wet leaves, and the chill of fog clung to my skin. The glow seemed to respond, shimmering brighter, then dimmer, like it was aware of me. A rustling came from the underbrush. I froze. The shapes inside the light twisted. Elongated shadows, then collapsed into nothing. I inhaled slowly. The air smelled of wet pine and something faintly metallic. It made the hairs on my arms rise. The hum began softly, like a thread of static wound through the air. It vibrated against my chest, tickled my teeth, slid across the back of my neck. I reached the edge of the glow. The shapes flickered one last time, then nothing. The light vanished. The clearing was empty, damp earth, dark shadows, and silence. The hum lingered, soft, persistent. It pressed into my ears, into my skin, into my thoughts. I stepped forward. The fog swallowed my feet. Branches scraped my face. The damp ground clung to my shoes. The forest seemed to lean closer, watching me, listening. I glanced back at where the glow had been. Nothing remained. No trace, no warmth. Only the faint smell of wet moss and something unplaceable. The clearing seemed smaller than before. Closer. I could feel the pulse of the hum in my chest. It was inside me now. Or perhaps I had stepped inside it. A shadow flickered across the edge of my vision. I thought I saw shapes in the trees. Stretching limbs, elongated forms, then gone the instant I focused. I breathed slowly. The fog wrapped tighter around my legs. The earth seemed to rise and fall beneath me like a quiet, measured heartbeat. The hum hummed louder, vibrating through the soles of my shoes. I stepped into the clearing fully. The ground was soft, wet, and undisturbed. No light, no shapes, no footprints. Only damp leaves clinging to my ankles. The hum lingered. A pulse beneath my ribs, a vibration in the tips of my fingers. I knelt slightly to touch the earth. Cool, soft, yielding. Nothing else responded. No light, no shapes, no warmth, no breath. Only the quiet hum. I wanted to leave. I wanted to turn away, but something kept me rooted. Curiosity, unease, a pull I could not name. The fog began to swirl. It twined around my legs, around my arms, around my thoughts. The trees leaned closer. Shadows stretched across the clearing. A faint pulse of light flickered in the distance. Or maybe it was my mind reaching. I breathed again. The hum softened. It receded slightly, but never left entirely. The clearing was empty, damp, silent in shape, alive in feeling. I rose slowly. Every step carried the weight of unseen eyes. The fog whispered around me. The earth clung to my feet. The hum lingered beneath the surface of everything. I glanced back once more. The clearing remained empty, the pale glow gone. The shapes vanished. Only the forest, the damp air, the hum beneath it all. I moved forward. Soft steps, careful through the fog that clung to me. The clearing faded behind me, and the forest swallowed its secrets. And still, the hum followed. The forest was still. Too still. The fog clung low to the ground, cool and damp against my ankles. A hum began to rise. Low, deep, resonating through the earth, through my chest, through the tips of my fingers. Branches trembled above me, but the air was still. No wind moved them. Yet they swayed. as if following some invisible rhythm. The shadows themselves seemed alive, stretching and bending, swaying in time with the hum. I blinked, and they shifted again, sliding along the trunks, reaching toward me in silence. I crouched slightly. The ground felt almost liquid beneath my shoes, soft and pulsing with the vibration of the sound. The forest smelled damp of wet pine and old decay. The hum pressed into my chest, hypnotic, terrifying, like the world itself was breathing. I reached out. My fingers brushed the bark of a tree. It throbbed in time with the sound. I could feel the vibration travel up my arm, into my bones, into my teeth. I stepped forward carefully. The fog wrapped around my legs. Every step made the shadows ripple. They followed me, mirroring my motion. The hum deepened. It was no longer just in my ears. It moved under my feet, under the damp soil, a vibration that spoke to the spine. A flicker of pale light glimmered through the trees. The shadows leaned toward it, swayed with it, and I felt pulled, drawn closer without wanting to be. I stopped. The shadows halted too, suspended in the hypnotic rhythm. The hum became louder, deeper, like it had taken a breath and held it just for me. I tried to look up. The branches above twisted impossibly. Shadows interlaced with light, then separated, then merged again. The forest was alive, and it was waiting. I could not tell if I was hearing or feeling the sound. The hum vibrated in my chest, in the soles of my shoes, inside the fog that clung to my skin. It hummed with the pulse of the earth, or perhaps it was the earth itself humming through me. The clearing ahead remained empty, but the sensation of being watched pressed on me. The shadows danced silently across the wet ground. They moved in the periphery of my vision, stretching along the trunks, vanishing when I tried to focus. I breathed slowly. The fog shifted around my ankles. The hum pulsed again, steady, unrelenting. I felt it in the back of my skull, a gentle vibration that made my teeth buzz. I stepped forward again. Soft, careful, measured. The shadows swayed to match me. Branches bent slightly toward the rhythm. The fog pressed closer. And still the hum persisted, an invisible tide beneath the trees. I stopped, and silence nearly fell. But the hum remained, soft, insistent, threading through the forest like a hidden current. I glanced around. The trees were endless, their dark forms rising above me. The shadows leaned and stretched, sometimes merging with the fog, sometimes dissolving into darkness. The vibration in the ground lessened slightly. The hum softened, but it never left entirely. It lingered beneath my feet, in the spaces between the trees, pressing gently, reminding me I was not alone. I moved again. Slow steps, careful steps, following the subtle rhythm, matching the sway of shadows, letting the hum guide me. The fog clung tighter. The ground stayed soft, wet. The forest seemed endless, alive with sound and movement, and I walked within it, feeling the pulse of the humming shadows beneath everything. The trail narrowed. I found a ledge, thin and crumbling, overlooking a dark ravine. Fog rolled in thick waves, curling around my ankles, clinging to the damp soil. It smelled of wet stone and pine, with a faint, sharp tang I couldn't place. Every footstep echoed, soft at first, then heavier like a drumbeat in a cavern. The sound startled me, but I could not stop. I could not leave. The darkness below was complete. Shadows pooled in the crevices of rock. A low rustle rose from the depths, slow, deliberate, like something alive was stirring. I leaned closer to the edge. The fog swirled at the bottom of the ravine, thick, moving like water. Something shifted there. Too large to be an animal, too silent to be a person. I froze. The ledge trembled beneath me. Cold air brushed my face. The fog pressed upward, soft, damp, and endless. A pair of pale eyes caught mine, small, reflective, hovering in the mist below. They stared, still, and then vanished, swallowed by the fog. I held my breath. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint drum of my own heartbeat. The rustling moved again. Closer this time, shadows shifting beneath the fog. I stepped back from the ledge. The ground felt soft and unstable. Leaves clung to my shoes. A faint vibration ran through the soil, like the presence of something immense beneath me. I glanced down again. The fog moved in slow pulses. The darkness seemed to breathe. Shapes flickered at the edges of my vision, elongated and impossible, vanishing when I tried to focus. A branch scraped my arm. The ledge trembled slightly. I felt the earth beneath my feet shift in ways that were subtle but unmistakable. The fog thickened. It rose like a tide, swallowing the ravine below. The eyes did not return, but I could feel them somewhere just beyond sight. The rustling continued, a low, vibrating motion through the rocks, through the soil, through the fog curling around my legs. I could almost hear a breath, deep and measured, beneath the windless night. I shivered. The ledge narrowed again. Each step became deliberate, careful, slow. I felt the weight of the shadows pressing in, folding around me, shifting with every small movement. A pulse of pale light glimmered in the mist. It did not last. The shadows leaned toward it, stretching and twisting, then dissolved into the darkness. I crouched slightly, feeling the soft give of the earth beneath me. The fog pressed tighter. The sound of rustling moved in slow, hypnotic circles. I could not tell where it began or ended. I stepped back from the ledge. The darkness of the ravine seemed endless, silent but alive. Every small motion made the fog ripple. Every heartbeat echoed against unseen walls. The ledge shivered beneath me one last time. The fog rolled in heavier waves, clinging to the rocks, swirling around my legs, pressing toward the edge. I moved carefully along the trail. Each footstep weighed heavy. Each breath lingered in my chest. The pale eyes did not return. The rustling continued, distant, like a presence that had not left, that would not leave. I kept walking. The fog swallowed the ravine behind me. The ledge, the shadows, the eyes, all vanished into silence, and yet the rustling lingered, beneath the earth, beneath the fog, waiting. The ferns grew thick around me, wet and tall, brushing against my arms. The air smelled of earth, moss, and damp wood. Fog clung to the undergrowth, curling around my ankles. Through the green, I saw it. A cabin, small, forgotten. Its windows black and empty. The wood was darkened with age, and the roof sagged slightly, weighed down by years of neglect. The door moved. A slow creak. It opened as if it had been waiting. I stepped closer. A chill pressed against my skin, but I felt drawn in anyway. Inside, silence stretched. Everything was still. Dust hung in the air. The wooden floor groaned beneath my careful steps. The smell of smoke lingered, stale, cold, as though a fire had burned here long ago, then vanished without trace. Footprints appeared on the floor, faint, soft, leading nowhere. I bent to follow them, but they dissolved into the shadows. I could feel the cabin breathing around me, quiet and slow. The windows stared. Black holes in the walls. No reflection, no movement, only a pale light of fog from outside, slanting thinly across the floor. It revealed the edges of things. A chair tipped slightly, a table with dust thick upon it, the faint ripple of fabric where curtains had hung. I moved forward carefully. The floorboards were cold beneath my shoes. The footprints led me through the center of the room, then vanished in front of the door at the back. I leaned closer. The air smelled of old smoke and dry wood, and I could feel the stillness pressing in, thick and tangible. A faint rustle reached my ears. Or perhaps it was my own movement, echoing in the quiet. The cabin seemed alive, not with people, but with the memory of presence, a trace of life long gone. I traced the edges of the walls with my fingers. The wood was cold, rough, damp in patches. I could feel the weight of years, the slow settling of the structure, the sigh of timber shifting. The fog outside shifted. It pressed against the windows, soft, almost caressing. I could hear a distant hum, or perhaps imagined it, threading through the silence of the cabin. I stepped to the back door. The footprints ended here. The space beyond was empty. A chill pressed through the gap beneath the door, and I could smell the forest beyond. Wet leaves and moss mingled with the lingering smoke. The cabin seemed to watch me. The shadows stretched and shrank in the corners, leaning subtly toward me, then retreating when I moved my gaze. I sat lightly on the edge of the old table. The wood creaked, faintly, as though breathing beneath me. The air felt thicker, the smell of smoke more distinct, and I realized I was alone, and not alone. The door swayed slightly again. The fog pressed closer, moving with the rhythm of my breath. The cabin held itself perfectly still, but the footprints whispered through the silence, a path that led nowhere and everywhere at once. I rose slowly. Every movement echoed softly against the walls. I felt the cold, the smell, the silence. Layered, tangible, alive in the way only empty places can be. I stepped toward the door. The cabin seemed to exhale, a faint shiver running across the floorboards. I felt the pull of the outside air, the damp smell of forest and earth, and I wanted to leave. But I stayed a moment longer, drawn to the emptiness, to the faint trail of forgotten presence. The door closed behind me gently. The cabin stood silently, its windows staring blackly into the fog. The ferns swayed lightly around it. The smell of smoke lingered. The footprints vanished. I walked away slowly, each step careful in the thick fog. And I knew the cabin waited, patient, silent, remembering. The fog hung low, curling around my ankles, soft and damp against my skin. The forest smelled of wet pine earth and the faint, bitter tang of decay. Above me, I noticed them, eyes, reflecting faint moonlight, glimmering high in the canopy. They blinked slowly, silently, tracking every movement I made. I stopped. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Branches shivered, snapping gently, though no wind stirred them. The fog pressed closer to the ground. I could feel their gaze. A weight above me, judging, patient, unseen yet undeniable. The hairs along my neck stood upright. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. I moved slowly, careful. The needles beneath my shoes were damp and soft. Leaves clung to the soles. Every step seemed magnified. Every soft footfall mirrored in the stillness. The eyes shifted. They were more than reflections, shapes glimmering faintly, round, pale, framed by shadowed branches. They followed me with deliberate calm, not frantic, not chaotic, just watchful. A branch cracked above. I froze. The sound rolled through the fog, soft yet sharp, like a whisper in my ear. The eyes blinked again. I felt their presence bend the air. I glanced away. The eyes vanished. Only darkness remained. The fog thickened slightly, soft and curling. I could hear the wind move through needles, a low, steady hiss, carrying the forest's quiet judgment. I dared another look. They returned, high, just beneath the moonlight, still blinking, silently observing. I shivered. The damp air pressed into my lungs. The cold pricked the backs of my hands. I walked slowly forward, every step measured. Branches scraped gently against my arms. The forest seemed to lean closer, shadows swaying, holding secrets in the darkness. The eyes remained fixed, motionless, except for the blink. I could feel a pull, like gravity had a whisper of its own, tugging at my chest. The fog swirled around my legs. The needles on the ground whispered underfoot. I stopped. The stillness pressed in. No wind moved, no creature stirred, and yet I was aware of their watchfulness threaded through every silent breath of the forest. I tilted my head, a soft rustle in the canopy. The eyes followed, moving with branches as if woven into them. Their gaze weighed heavily, curiosity, patience, and something darker I could not name. I breathed slowly, letting the fog wrap around me. The forest seemed to hum faintly beneath the sound of needles, a vibration through the ground, through my shoes, through my chest. I moved again. The eyes stayed, blazing pale in the dark canopy, hovering in rhythm with some secret cadence. I could feel them in my thoughts, like a shadow sliding over the edges of my mind. I turned my gaze briefly away. They vanished. Only the wind through needles remained. The forest seemed calm again, but I knew better. They waited. Above. I dared one last glance. The eyes reappeared. Silent, patient, watching, and blinking slowly in the faint moonlight. I walked on carefully, soft footsteps through damp needles. The fog trailed at my ankles, thick and unyielding. The shadows above shifted ever so slightly, the eyes following until they slipped out of sight. The forest swallowed them. The branches still trembled in the still air. A faint hiss of wind moved through the needles. I could feel the gaze linger, even as it disappeared. And I knew, even without seeing them, the forest was watching. Patient, silent, always there. The fog pressed low. Thick and damp, curling around my ankles, sliding along my sleeves. It smelled of wet earth, pine, and something faintly metallic. It moved strangely, thickening and thinning like a slow pulse. I could feel it press against my skin, warm in some places, cold in others, as if it were breathing with me. Shapes emerged. Fleeting. A pale face in the corner of my vision, a hand brushing past my arm. I turned, and they vanished. Nothing stayed long enough to be seen clearly. I walked carefully. The ground was soft beneath my shoes. Leaves clung damply to the soles. Every footstep echoed softly in the fog. The shapes seemed to follow me, curling around me like threads of smoke. I stopped. The fog thickened. It pressed against my chest, against my back, like it knew where I breathed. I could hear it move, soft and intimate, pressing whispers into the small spaces between trees. I reached out my hand. The fog slipped through my fingers. A brush of something soft and warm lingered, gone before I could grasp it. It felt sorrowful, as if holding memories I could not name. The light shifted slightly. Moonlight streaked thinly through the trees. It revealed a shadow that flickered. Long and narrow, stretching, then collapsing into nothing. A rustle rose from the underbrush. The fog reacted. It thickened, swirled, wrapped closer around my legs. The forest seemed to breathe with me, sharing in the slow, intimate rhythm. I moved again. Soft footsteps, careful, deliberate. The fog followed, pressing closer, curling up my sleeves, around my neck, against my hair. Shapes flickered at the edges of my vision. Never still, never entirely absent. I crouched slightly. The damp soil pressed into my palms. The fog licked my cheeks. I felt it move inside the spaces of my body, a touch that was not solid but aware, attentive, and yet terrifying. A pale face appeared briefly ahead, eyes wide, silent. And then it was gone, leaving only the damp scent of earth and something warmer, like the memory of breath. I swallowed. The fog pulsed around me. I felt it tighten, then relax, like it had a rhythm all its own. I could sense it thinking, watching, drawing me deeper. A soft hum began beneath the rustling of leaves. I could feel it in my chest, under my ribs, in the tips of my fingers. The fog pulsed with it, pressing closer in tandem with the vibration. I turned slowly. The forest seemed to bend inward. The shapes appeared for a moment, hands, faces, glimpses of shadows, then dissolved immediately. The fog exhaled against my skin, carrying a cold, sorrowful weight. I moved forward. Every step was deliberate. The fog trailed my legs, swirled around my arms, slid across my shoulders. I could feel it in every breath I took, as if the forest itself were breathing through me. The light shifted again. A fleeting face appeared in the fog, eyes glimmering faintly, then gone. I blinked. The fog pressed closer. I could feel its pulse. I stopped again. The forest fell silent. The shapes vanished. But the fog lingered, intimate, oppressive, like a presence that could not be left behind. I breathed slowly, felt the pulse of fog against my skin. Every hair stood on end. The earth smelled wet and familiar, but the fog carried a sorrow I could not name. I moved finally, carefully, soft footsteps through the damp undergrowth. The fog followed, wrapping around me one last time. The shapes disappeared, but the pulse remained, breathing with me, watching and waiting. The fog hung low, soft, damp, curling around my ankles. The forest smelled of wet pine, earth, and faint decay. A sound drifted through the trees, soft at first, almost playful. Then it grew, stretching, echoing, a hollow, childlike laughter that came from nowhere. I froze. The air pressed against my skin. The fog shifted around my legs, curling tighter. The laughter pulsed with the forest, like the trees themselves had learned to giggle. I called out softly. No answer came. Only the echo of my voice, swallowed quickly by the fog. The laughter grew louder, closer, unseen. Branches shifted above, twisting, snapping, as though the canopy had eyes. The fog pressed against my face, cold and damp. The presence behind me grew, heavy in the air, like a weight pressing down my shoulders. I stepped forward slowly. Needles and leaves clung to my shoes. Every footfall sounded exaggerated in the stillness. The laughter lingered, following each movement. It seemed playful, but there was a sharpness beneath it, a hollow emptiness that made my chest tighten. I dared to glance behind me. Nothing, only fog, trees, and shadows. And yet, I felt watched. Something unseen, moving silently in rhythm with the laughter, breathing with the forest. The fog swirled around my legs. A branch brushed my arm. I jumped slightly. The laughter rippled again, closer now, folding through the trees like a whispered secret. I called again, quieter this time. A breath, a pause, and then laughter echoing, surrounding me from all directions, yet with no source. I moved faster. Soft footsteps, careful, but the forest seemed to stretch. The fog thickened, pressing higher. Every tree cast shadows that shifted unnaturally. The laughter followed, slicing through the still air, light yet chilling. I stopped, listening. The world held its breath. Leaves rustled faintly. The laughter paused, then exhaled in a hollow, childlike tone, sliding into the fog like smoke. I could feel it behind me. The presence, silent but undeniable. I did not turn. I could sense it tracing the rhythm of my heartbeat, watching, patient. The fog swirled. It brushed my arms, clung to my hair. I felt my skin prickling. The laughter pulsed in time with the forest, with the rustling leaves, with the invisible weight behind me. I moved again, slowly. Branches scraped lightly against my shoulders. The forest seemed alive with whispers. The laughter followed, fading slightly, then returning, closer, never fully leaving, never letting me forget it. I paused at a small clearing. The fog rolled in waves, thick, curling around my legs. The laughter hung in the air, hollow, echoing. I shivered. The unseen presence pressed close, a rhythm beneath my feet, a pull in the damp air. I dared a glance behind me. Nothing visible. Only fog, shadows, and stillness. The laughter softened, folding into the quiet. But the weight remained. I breathed slowly. The fog clung to my clothes, to my hair, to the skin at the back of my neck. The forest remained still, but I knew better. The hollow laughter lingered, woven through the fog, threaded through the shadows, patient, watchful. I moved on carefully. Soft steps through damp needles. The fog trailed at my ankles. The presence behind me persistent. Breathing with the forest and waiting. The laughter faded into whispers, the echoes of childlike voices lost in the trees. The forest remained alive, silent, but heavy with unseen eyes, with shadows that pulsed and a presence that followed, unseen but ever near. The forest was quiet. Twilight draped over the trees, soft and gray, curling like smoke around the trunks. The air smelled damp and cold with the faint tang of decaying leaves. I came upon a small pond. Its surface was still, reflecting the dim light of fading day. a mirror of the sky, or so I thought. Something moved in the water. Not me, not my reflection. A subtle ripple, a shadow bending where no shadow should be. I leaned closer. The surface trembled beneath my gaze, then rippled into darkness. I paused. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Every rustle of leaves, every sigh of wind was amplified in the silence. I felt eyes on me. Not one pair, but many watching from every shadowed corner. I reached out. Fingers hovered above the pond. The water quivered, not with my touch, but as if responding to some unseen presence. The shadows beneath the surface shifted. Elongated, impossible, bending against reason. I swallowed. The damp air clung to my skin. Fog rose from the forest floor, curling around my legs. It pressed softly, almost like a touch, yet heavy with expectation. The reflection flickered again. Shapes moved, soft and fleeting. A hand? A face? I could not tell. It dissolved before I could focus. The pond seemed alive, watching, breathing beneath the twilight. I stepped back slightly. The forest pressed closer. Shadows pooled under every tree. The air hummed faintly. A vibration that I could feel through my feet, through my chest, through my skin. The water shifted again. Ripples expanded slowly, folding over themselves. Darkness moved within them, folding against the edges of light. I felt drawn forward, compelled to touch it, to see it clearly, yet afraid of what would respond. The fog thickened around the pond. Soft footsteps of unseen creatures, or my own echo, moved through the mist. The shadows stretched and bent unnaturally, leaning toward the pond. Every small sound, every faint rustle of leaf or branch felt magnified. I leaned closer again. The pond reflected me and not me. The water darkened beneath my gaze, swallowing the dim twilight. Shapes flickered, brief, impossible. I shivered. A breath of wind, or was it the forest itself? Rippled across the water. The shadows bent, reaching, folding into the pond. I could feel the weight of the watching, the pull of presence from every direction. The fog pressed higher, curling around my arms, sliding down my neck. I crouched slightly. Fingers brushed the water. The surface shivered, then fell perfectly still. Darkness stared back at me. I felt a cold weight in my chest, a pressure in the air. The forest had not exhaled, yet the pond seemed alive. I stood again. The twilight deepened. Shadows stretched further, coiling along the banks of the pond. The water reflected nothing of the sky now, only the pale distortion of the forest around me. And something else. Something unseen. I took a careful step back. The fog shifted behind me, sliding silently along the ground. The pond remained still, dark, watching. I could feel eyes in every direction, threading the trees, following me. I exhaled slowly. The air smelled damp and sharp, the fog curling around my ankles. The surface of the pond shimmered faintly in the dim light. A ripple passed across it, soft, deliberate, like a pulse. I turned and walked slowly away. Every footstep pressed into damp soil, echoing in the stillness. The pond stayed behind me, dark, reflective, holding shadows and secrets in its surface. I glanced back once. The water was calm. Yet I knew. The forest, the pond, the shadows, they were watching still, patient, silent, waiting. The forest pressed close. Fog curled along the ground, thick and damp, snaking around my ankles, pressing faintly against my legs as I walked. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, with a faint metallic tang I couldn't place. I followed the trail. Soft footsteps pressed into the mossy soil. Leaves clung damply to my shoes. The path twisted and narrowed, snaking between trees that leaned inward, their shadows stretching long and dark. The trail disappeared. Thick brambles blocked the way. Fog thickened ahead, curling like smoke around the undergrowth. I stepped forward carefully. Every movement seemed mirrored by the forest, soft rustles in the shadows, echoing my hesitation. I pushed through the brambles. They scratched at my arms. The scent of wet leaves and bark filled my nostrils. But when I emerged, I was back in the same clearing. The same moss, the same trees bathed in dim, pale light. I took another step. The path appeared again, narrow, inviting. I followed it. Brambles rose again, thick and impenetrable. The fog pressed closer. I pushed forward and returned once more to the clearing. A strange disorientation settled over me. Time seemed altered. Moments stretched and bent. The forest rewrote itself with every step, folding paths, folding shadows, folding the fog. I breathed slowly. The fog curled around my hands. It slipped between my fingers like water. Soft whispers seemed to ride the mist, rustling leaves, branch tips swaying gently though the wind was still. I felt unseen eyes tracing me, silent and patient. I stepped in a different direction. The path twisted oddly beneath the pale light. Shadows shifted unnaturally. I thought I saw movement between the trees. A branch bending, a dark shape sliding behind another. But when I focused, there was nothing. Only fog. Only silence. The clearing returned again. I felt a pull in the air, as if the forest was breathing in tandem with me, folding space and time until each step circled back to this place. The fog wrapped tighter around my legs, coiling softly, pressing against my skin. I crouched to touch the moss. It was cold and damp beneath my fingers. Every small sound amplified, the soft hiss of fog curling, the faint creak of an unseen branch. Each time I rose, the clearing greeted me. Each path forward, a circle bending impossibly. I moved slowly, deliberately. Soft footsteps pressed into wet soil. Leaves whispered underfoot. The fog swirled at my ankles, thick and curling like a slow pulse in the forest floor. I could feel the weight of unseen presence, watching, waiting. I tried another route. Brambles parted slightly, then thickened again. The path folded into itself, twisting, impossible. Time and space seemed to bend. Every step carried me back to the clearing, always the same. I paused. The forest seemed alive, breathing softly through mist and leaves. The clearing stretched endlessly, folding shadows into shadows, fog into fog. I felt utterly alone, yet not alone. Presence lingered, patient, silent. I breathed slowly, letting the cold, damp fog curl around my legs. Every nerve prickled. Every rustle of leaves seemed deliberate. I knew the path was no longer fixed. The forest had rewritten itself, folded the way into impossibility. I moved carefully again. Soft footsteps echoed faintly, absorbed by the thick mist. Brambles scratched at my hands. Shadows leaned closer, then receded into the fog. The clearing waited, timeless, unchanging, folding me into its endless loop. I stopped. The fog curled around me. I felt the forest breathe in slow rhythm. Time had no hold here. The path was gone. The trail was gone. Only the clearing and the patient, silent presence that followed me, always waiting, always unseen. The forest floor was alive. Roots emerged from the earth, thick and twisting, curling like serpents beneath the fog. The air was damp, rich with the smell of wet soil and decay, heavy and close. I stepped carefully. Soft footsteps pressed into moss and dirt. Every movement made the roots shift slightly, like they were aware of me. Low whispers rose from the ground, almost imperceptible, like old incantations murmured by the soil itself. The fog pressed around my legs. It slipped through the cracks between roots, winding upward, touching my skin softly, yet with a weight that made my breath catch. I bent slightly to look closer. Roots moved subtly, twisting in impossible patterns. A thick one pulsed lightly, as if breathing. The whispers rose, folding around me, filling the silence of the forest. Every step was deliberate. The earth beneath my feet seemed to shift. Needles and leaves clung to my shoes. The fog curled higher. The whispers followed, soft, patient, threading through my mind like a half-remembered dream. A shadow moved. A root lifted slightly as if sensing me, a slow serpentine motion that chilled my spine. I felt a pull beneath my soles like the forest was breathing through the ground. I crouched. Fingers brushed damp soil. The whispers rose again, slightly louder, folding in rhythm with the pulsing roots. I smelled something faintly metallic, tinged with wet decay, as if the forest exhaled secrets I could not name. I straightened slowly. The fog swirled at my ankles. Roots shifted with faint pressure, curling toward me, then withdrawing. The whispers wound around my ears, threading into every thought, soft and ancient. I moved forward. Soft footsteps pressed into the earth. Every step seemed mirrored by the subtle twitching of roots. The forest felt alive, patiently observing. Every sound, the faint rustle of leaves, the whisper of the wind, folded into the pulsing rhythm beneath me. A thicker root rose suddenly, arching like a bridge above the ground. I hesitated. The fog wrapped closer, touching my skin, pressing softly, almost like guidance, almost like warning. The whispers lifted, intensifying, wrapping around me, insistent but indecipherable. I stepped beneath the arching root. It shifted slightly, pulsing beneath my touch, then recoiled into the soil. I could feel centuries of stillness in the earth, sleeping life that stirred only when disturbed. The fog thickened. Roots curled like fingers along the forest floor, leaning, twitching, reaching for the spaces between my steps. The whispers became clearer, a low hum of language I did not know, threads of sound brushing against my mind. Every breath I took mingled with damp air, earth, and mist. I stopped. The forest held its breath. Roots shifted, slow, deliberate, sliding slightly through the soil. The whispers faded, folding back into the damp earth. The fog pressed around me softly. I felt an almost magnetic pull from the ground, a presence beneath the roots, patient, ancient. The forest seemed to watch silently, holding centuries of waiting in its soil, alive and aware beneath the creeping fog. I moved slowly again, each step careful. Roots twined beneath the earth and over the surface, curling and uncurling with subtle life. The whispers murmured softly, threaded through the mist, echoing faintly in the hollow spaces between trees. I paused. The fog swirled around my ankles. The earth beneath my feet pulsed faintly. Roots quivered, breathing slowly, folding the forest into itself. I could sense it, alive beneath me, watchful and ancient beyond thought. I breathed slowly. The forest whispered beneath me. Roots twisted, fog curled higher, and silence followed. The whispers faded but lingered, a reminder of something that slept just beneath the soil. Every step forward was deliberate. The forest held me in its quiet rhythm. Roots, fog, whispers, folded together in patient observation. I was alone, yet the earth watched, alive beneath the surface, and I could feel it in every shiver of fog, every subtle twitch of the roots. The forest was hushed. Moonlight spilled through the branches, silver and cold. The air smelled of damp pine and frost, clinging lightly to my skin. I walked slowly. Soft footsteps pressed into wet leaves. The fog curled around my ankles, thick and whispering against the ground. Shadows stretched long, leaning toward me. A figure appeared, half hidden behind the trees. Its shape was tall, slowly swaying as if sensing my presence. Moonlight kissed the edges of it, casting long, impossible shadows across the forest floor. I froze. The fog pressed against my legs. The air seemed to thrum softly, like the forest held its breath. Its movements were deliberate, patient. Watching me, I blinked, and it was gone. No rustle, no footfall, only the lingering chill of its presence. The forest felt heavier, every branch and leaf more aware. Even the fog seemed to tighten around me. I stepped forward cautiously. The moss was cold beneath my feet. Each step echoed faintly, swallowed quickly by the dense shadows. I felt its gaze, a weight across the small of my back, like the air itself pressed with eyes I could not see. The figure reappeared, or perhaps it had never truly left. It stood still, half hidden, blending into the trees as if the moonlight itself favored it. I could feel its intent, silent, deliberate, folded into the stillness around me. The fog shifted with my movement. It brushed my arms lightly, clinging damply, pressing against my shoulders. The smell of wet earth filled my nose. The forest seemed alive, listening, moving with the rhythm of that unseen presence. I tried to focus. Shadows between the trees stretched unnaturally. Branches swayed though the air was still. A faint rustle echoed behind me. I dared not turn. The figure was patient, waiting. I took another step. The cold of the night bit at my cheeks. Fog trailed at my ankles. The forest whispered softly around me, branches creaking gently, the distant hum of life beneath the soil. The figure remained, half hidden, always in the corner of my eye. I stopped. Silence enveloped me. Breath misted faintly in the cold air. The forest pressed inward, shadows leaning, the fog curling higher. I could still feel it, the presence, its slow, deliberate gaze threading through the moonlight. I blinked again. Nothing. No figure. No movement. Only the chill, folded into the fog. The forest exhaled slowly around me, branches bending, shadows shifting, but the weight remained, watchful, patient, hidden just beyond my vision. I stepped forward. Leaves pressed damply against my shoes. Fog swirled around my legs. Every small sound, the creak of a branch, the faint rustle of distant needles, felt amplified, deliberate. I could sense the figure nearby, folded into the shadows, moving with the forest, yet unseen. The moonlight caught a flicker, a shadow shifting behind a tree, leaning slightly, deliberate. My heart beat slowly, mirrored by the forest, the fog, the cold air. The presence lingered, woven into the quiet, patient, as if the forest itself had bent to its will. I breathed slowly. Fog curled at my ankles. Every step forward pressed against the damp soil. I could feel the weight of eyes without seeing them. The figure was gone, yet the chill remained, folded into the air, threaded through the trees, lingering beyond the reach of moonlight. I moved on carefully, soft footsteps pressing into the moss. The forest held its breath. The moonlight shimmered faintly on leaves and fog. I did not look back. But the presence followed, patient, deliberate, woven into the stillness, folded in every shadow and always watching. The night was still. Frost clung to every branch and my breath crystallized in the cold air. The forest smelled of ice and damp pine, sharp and metallic beneath the quiet. I stepped forward slowly. The snow pressed softly beneath my shoes. The fog hovered low, curling around my ankles, soft and damp. Each step sounded hollow, yet swallowed quickly by the thick, frozen air. Something moved beside me. I couldn't see it, but I felt it matching my pace, pressing close in a way that made my skin prickle. Its presence was faint, like a shadow brushing along the edge of perception. I breathed slowly. Its breath matched mine. A soft exhale mirrored my own, warm against the cold night, brushed with frost. I turned slightly. Nothing, only fog and the forest, silent and still. I moved again. Each motion mirrored, a rhythm between me and something unseen. The frost cracked faintly beneath my steps, rustling needles catching the pale light. I could feel its weight beside me, pressing through the air, pressing through the fog. I stopped. The world held its breath. Every branch and leaf seemed frozen in time, yet the presence remained, hovering, patient, deliberate. I sensed it in the slight cold against my neck, in the subtle shift of air around my arms. The fog swirled. It brushed softly against my skin, sliding along the contours of my legs, coiling lightly like smoke. My own breath fogged in the cold, then another formed beside it, matching, folding into mine. The intimacy of it was unsettling, a quiet echo of life in the void. I walked carefully, soft steps pressing into frozen earth. Every movement was mirrored, every pause echoed. Branches creaked faintly above, then fell silent. The forest seemed alive, watching, waiting. I crouched slightly, touching the frost-damp earth beneath me. It was cold, rough beneath my fingers, tiny crystals crunching softly. I could feel the presence lean closer, as though curious, following the line of my spine, threading the air with unseen weight. I rose. The fog hugged my legs again. A shadow shifted at the edge of vision, moving just beyond clarity. I blinked. Nothing. Only the mirrored rhythm, breath to breath, step to step. The night deepened. Stars peeked faintly through the fog. The forest smelled colder, tighter, pressing around me. Each inhale of the frozen air carried the weight of unseen eyes, watching, matching, folded into the hush of night. I slowed. Every nerve was aware. The presence was patient, its closeness tangible. But it made no sound beyond the echo of my own breath. I could feel it brushing past, a subtle pressure along my shoulder, then along my leg. I moved carefully forward. Snow crunched beneath me. The fog swirled higher, pressing damply against skin, folding the forest into itself. I could feel it everywhere, in the cold, in the rhythm of mirrored movement, in the hush that pressed around me like velvet. I stopped again. The breath matched mine, soft, near, and yet without form. I could feel centuries of stillness in the cold earth, pressing upward, folding into the presence beside me. It was patient. It was close. I exhaled slowly. The fog curled at my ankles. Frost sparkled faintly in the moonlight. Every sound, branches, shifting snow, the gentle hum of night, folded into the rhythm of that unseen twin. I could feel it in every motion, every frozen crystal on my breath, every heartbeat that trembled in the silence. I moved on cautiously. Steps careful, deliberate. The presence pressed yet silent. Breath met breath, step met step, folded through the mist, woven into the night itself. I was not alone. But it remained unseen, intimate, patient, and always beside me. The forest was quiet, yet the air felt heavy, thick with fog that curled around the trunks of pines. The scent of wet earth and decaying needles lingered. Every step pressed softly into the damp soil, a muted rhythm swallowed quickly by the silence. Then a door slammed, softly, distant. Yet it vibrated through my chest, a hollow pulse that made my breath catch. I froze. The fog clung to my legs. Branches hung still, but the sound lingered. There was no house, only the forest, and the faint echo of a door, folding into the fog like smoke. My heartbeat quickened, small and deliberate. Curiosity and fear intertwined, a slow coil in my chest. I stepped forward cautiously. Soft footsteps pressed into moss and frost. Every movement seemed louder than it should, rustling needles and frozen leaves beneath my shoes. The fog swirled higher, curling around my ankles, pressing damp and cold. Another soft slam, closer this time. It reverberated through the trees, threaded into the mist, folding the forest into itself. I could feel it in my chest again, vibrating through bone, echoing along my spine. I moved toward the sound. Fog clung to my sleeves. The forest smelled colder, metallic, like ice beneath the soil. Branches creaked faintly, shadows leaning, stretching. Each step brought the sound nearer, yet the source remained unseen. I reached a clearing. The fog rolled in waves around gnarled roots. The ground was soft beneath my feet. A branch had fallen there, bare and jagged, resting like a forgotten threshold. I stared, half expecting it to rise. The echo of the door had vanished. Silence followed. Thick, heavy, folded around me like velvet. My breath fogged in the cold. The air vibrated faintly still, a reminder of the sound, of presence, of something patient and unseen. I bent to touch the branch. Cold and rough beneath my fingers. No hinges, no frame, just wood and frost. The echo of the door lingered in my ears, soft, fading, like a whisper I could almost follow. I stood slowly. The fog pressed higher. It brushed damply against my skin, coiling lightly around ankles and sleeves. The forest seemed aware, leaning toward me, quiet but watchful. The sound could have been imagined, yet my chest still throbbed from its vibration. I moved again. Steps careful, deliberate. Needles and moss clung to my shoes. Every sound, branch, leaf, subtle shift of fog folded into the memory of that door. I felt the weight of its absence. A hollow presence pressing against the fog folded into the quiet. The clearing felt smaller now. Shadows leaned closer, dark shapes curling beneath the trunks of pines. I could feel the echo of the slam in every nerve ending, a lingering vibration that threaded through the mist. Curiosity nudged forward. Fear held me still. I took a final step toward the fallen branch. Fog wrapped around me, soft, cold, persistent. The echo had faded completely, yet the air seemed to hum faintly, like the memory of sound pressed into the forest. I pressed my hand to my chest. The forest remained still, breath held, watchful, folded into silence and fog. I moved slowly away. Every step was careful. The branch remained bare, still, a reminder of something that had never truly been there. The echo had vanished, leaving only the weight of anticipation, the subtle vibration of absence, and the cold press of fog along my skin. The forest swallowed the sound completely. I felt alone, yet watched. Breath slow, deliberate, soft footsteps fading into the fog. And somewhere, just out of reach, the memory of a door remained, folded into the night, waiting. The forest lay in muted silver light. Mist curled between trunks, wet against my skin. The smell of damp pine and earth pressed into the cold air, faint, metallic. Every footstep sank softly, echoing only in my own ears. Shadows stretched, slowly, unnaturally. Branches reached in ways they shouldn't, bending toward shapes that weren't there. I glanced at my own shadow. It lingered behind me longer than it should, folded into the fog, watching. I stepped forward. Leaves whispered underfoot, their damp rustle threading through the silence. Every shadow moved with a mind of its own, sliding across trunks, pooling at the base of rocks. A cold pulse crawled through my chest. I could no longer tell which direction was safe. The fog thickened. It coiled around my ankles, sliding like water over frozen stone. I reached out, touching it lightly. It was damp, almost alive, pressing against my fingers with quiet insistence. The shadows responded, stretching, twisting, folding across the uneven forest floor. I paused. The mist held its breath. My own shadow crouched at the edge of vision, shivering and still, yet separate from me. Something about it hummed beneath my skin, a subtle vibration that made every nerve tingle. Branches shifted above. No wind moved them, only the shadows, elongated and serpentine, twisting in patterns that made the hairs on my arms rise. I tried to turn, but the forest had no orientation now. Each path seemed wrong, each step uncertain. I walked carefully. The ground was slick with frost, needles sticking to shoes. Shadows bled into each other, a soft tide of dark shapes that moved independently, curling toward me, away from me, folding in the mist. I could feel the cold of the fog brushing my neck, like the whisper of a presence that was always just behind. I stopped again. Every shadow paused with me, then elongated further, stretching into shapes my mind could not name. A faint hum ran through the mist, low, vibrating, folded into the chill that pressed against my skin. I could smell the damp earth, a sharp tang of frost and decay, as though the forest itself exhaled quietly. I moved slowly forward. Soft footsteps sank into the moss. Each shadow shifted in response, mirroring me, diverging, folding back. The fog curled higher, coiling around calves and knees, pressing damp and cold. I could no longer trust the direction, the rhythm of the ground beneath, the shapes of the trees. Something flickered in the corner of my eye. A shadow that moved against the pull of moonlight, bending around a tree like water, folding into the mist, then vanishing. I blinked. Nothing remained but the cold, the fog, and the soft pulse of my own breath. I took a slow, deliberate step. The shadows reacted. They stretched, rippled, and pooled in dark folds where light could not reach. The forest seemed to breathe, moving silently with the rhythm of the unseen. My skin prickled with the awareness of being observed, even by shapes that could not have life. I tried to keep moving. The fog pressed closer. It wrapped like cold silk, damp and persistent. Shadows slithered across roots, curling at the edges of vision. My shadow remained, watching, folded into the mist, a twin that did not belong to me. I stopped. Breath crystallized in the cold air. The forest was quiet, yet alive in its own way. The shadows shifted, slow, deliberate, patient. I could feel the uncertainty in the ground, the air, the mist that coiled against my legs. I turned slowly. Every shadow followed. Every path looked wrong. Every step was uncertain. I exhaled. The fog moved with me. The shadows twisted around me. And the forest held me in quiet, folded into its long, watchful night. The forest floor was blanketed in mist, soft and pale, curling around roots and moss like slow smoke. It glimmered faintly under the waning moon, casting silver light over the damp earth. The smell of wet pine mingled with the cold, metallic, sharp against the fog. I stepped carefully. The mist parted around my ankles, pressing lightly against skin, cold and damp. Each footstep sank into soft soil, rustling needles and leaves beneath. The air hummed faintly, a vibration I could feel in my chest. Then I saw them, faces, pale and expressionless, floating briefly within the mist. They blinked out the moment I looked directly, reappearing elsewhere with each step I took, eyes hollow, still watching quietly. A chill ran across my shoulders, though the forest was otherwise silent. I moved forward slowly. Mist swirled and rolled like a living tide, coiling around branches, pooling in hollows. The faces flickered in and out, shadows of shapes that shouldn't exist. I could hear my breath, soft, uneven, pressing against the stillness. The smell of damp earth was stronger here, heavy and close, a reminder that the forest itself was alive. A face appeared near a fallen branch, staring silently with empty eyes. I blinked. It was gone. The mist shimmered where it had been, curling like smoke rising from a cold fire. I felt a strange pull, the forest beckoning, drawing me closer to the luminous tide. I stepped further into the mist. Cold droplets pressed along my skin, tingling across wrists and ankles. Branches brushed softly against my sleeves, though there was no wind. Every face vanished when I tried to focus on it, only to appear again, a breath away, a fleeting glimpse of the impossible. The forest seemed to shift with every movement. Mist drifted in patterns, rising and falling like it breathed. The air hummed faintly, vibrating through the soles of my shoes, through the damp pine beneath my fingers. I could feel presence everywhere, but no shape could hold still long enough to touch. A face appeared high between two trunks. Its expression was blank. It tilted slightly as though observing, then disappeared as I tilted my head. The mist thickened, rolling over roots, pressing closer, damp and cold. I shivered. The forest seemed to pulse, like it was alive, like the mist itself carried thought. I moved slowly, deliberately. The faces flickered and shifted with every step, sometimes hovering at eye level, sometimes peaking just above the fog. The air smelled faintly of frost and decay, tang of damp needles and cold earth. A soft rustling followed me, though I saw nothing, felt only the weight of unseen attention. A particularly bright patch of mist glowed at my feet. A face formed inside it closer than any before, but I could not hold its gaze. It vanished when I tried to focus, leaving only silver fog rolling across the ground. I felt watched, drawn into the mist's slow pulse, its luminous rhythm threading into my chest. I paused. The forest held its breath with me. Faces blinked in and out, glimpses of the impossible, shapes that were not shapes. The mist pressed lightly against my arms and neck, soft, damp, cold. I could feel its movement, folding around my body, alive and silent. Slowly, I stepped back. The faces receded into the mist, fading, folding away like smoke. The air remained heavy, the pulse of the forest lingering. I could still feel the touch of the luminous fog, the memory of those watching eyes, hollow, expressionless, folded into the silence. I exhaled. The forest was still again, except for the lingering mist, rolling in gentle waves, alive in a way that words could not hold. I took a final step away, the cold pressing along my skin, and the memory of those faces hovered in the fog behind me, soft, fleeting, impossible, and quietly watching. The fog lay heavy over the trail, curling around roots and fallen leaves, softening every shadow. The forest smelled damp, earthy, with a hint of frost biting at my nose. Each step I took sank quietly into the soft soil, a whisper of movement in the still air. Then I noticed them, small footprints pressed into the earth beside mine. They were delicate, childlike, following exactly where I stepped. I stopped. They stopped. A chill slid down my spine. The mimicry was too precise, too deliberate. I moved again. The prints moved with me, soft, measured, echoing my pace. The fog pressed closer, clinging to my sleeves, brushing against my ankles. It smelled colder now, damp and metallic. Every rustle of leaves felt amplified, a static tension in the air. I bent to look closer. The prints were tiny, perfect imprints of small feet. No mud clung to them, no animal tracks. I had seen nothing moving. Only the footprints, matching mine step for step, never falling behind, never racing ahead. I took a slow step forward. The prints shifted in rhythm. I paused. They paused. My breath came shallow, quick. Cold mist swirled into my hair, settling on my skin, damp and chilling. Something unseen was here, watching, waiting, mimicking. The forest seemed to tighten around me. Branches brushed softly against my shoulders, though no wind moved. A faint hum rose from the damp earth, vibrating through my soles, through the pressure of the footprints beneath. I could smell wet moss and decayed leaves and something else, something faintly metallic like iron in water. I walked faster. The prince matched my pace, never faltering, never breaking the rhythm. I tried to step irregularly, hop, sidestep, shuffle. They adapted. Exact, echoing, relentless. Fear pressed against my ribs. The mist felt thicker, folding around my legs like living arms. I dared to look behind me. Nothing but fog. No shadow, no figure. Yet the prints were there. Soft, pale impressions in the soil. Pausing as I paused, resuming as I resumed. Every nerve in me screamed to turn and run, but the forest seemed to stretch endlessly ahead, twisting and bending, like it wanted me to stay. I slowed, listening. Footsteps, mine only. Yet the mimicry hummed beneath the soil. I could feel it, tiny weight pressing where none should exist. The mist moved with me, pressing into my ears, coating my cheeks, the fog damp, biting, alive. Branches scraped the path silently, and shadows shifted with no light to cast them. I could hear my heartbeat in my throat, sharp, quick, and beneath it a quieter, echoing pulse, matching every step I took. I stopped once more. The footprints paused. Time held its breath. I took a deep, shivering breath, trying to steady the rhythm, but the forest pressed closer. The prints resumed when I moved. They were patient, always waiting, never turning, never disappearing. The fog clung heavier now, cold droplets settling on my hair, my shoulders, my skin. The faint smell of damp iron rose again, tinged with the forest's decay. I finally broke the pattern. I stepped off the trail into thicker fog, and the prints did not follow. For a moment, silence swallowed everything. The air hung thick, a shivering tension in every branch, every clump of moss, every shifting shadow. And then, from the soft earth behind me, the footprints reappeared, perfectly aligned with where I had last walked. I did not look back again. I could feel their quiet presence, matching every heartbeat, every tremble in my limbs. The fog rolled on, dense and pulsating, and the forest waited. I walked faster, the prints keeping pace, and the mist closed softly around me, quiet, patient, alive, and endlessly watching. The thicket rose before me, dense and tangled, branches reaching like fingers, scraping against my shoulders as I pushed forward. The air smelled damp and sharp like wet pine and cold soil. The fog curled low, hugging the ground, softly brushing my ankles with every step. And then, silence. Not the ordinary quiet of the forest, not the hush of windless branches. This was heavier, oppressive. It pressed against my ears, flattened the rustling of leaves. Even the hum of my own breath felt muted. Each step sounded hollow, though no sound actually came. I tried to shake my head, to coax some noise into existence. Nothing. The thicket absorbed it all. The fog wrapped tighter, damp against my skin, filling my clothes with cold moisture. Shadows leaned inward, folding around me like dark water. I reached for a branch, my fingers sliding over rough bark, yet the branches made no sound as I brushed past. Even the softest crackle of leaves was swallowed instantly. I paused. A breath. Or was it a whisper? I could not tell. The silence had weight, as if the forest itself knew I had entered, watched me, and waited. My own heartbeat thudded in my chest, loud enough to echo in the stillness. I stepped forward again. Branches clung to my arms, wet with condensation. The smell of soil was richer now, almost suffocating. Something shifted just beyond the fog, or perhaps it only seemed that way. The silence made every movement hyper-real. I moved slowly, deliberately, fearing that even a whisper of sound might betray me. The fog thickened, turning familiar shapes into alien forms. Trees loomed, twisted, their dark trunks bending strangely, like they were leaning to peer at me. I tried to call out. My own voice died instantly. Nothing came of it. No echo, no answer. Just silence, so complete it felt alive, wrapping around my ears, pressing into my skull, making my teeth ache. A faint rustle in the distance? I couldn't tell. The silence was absolute. Even the hum beneath my feet, the vibration of the forest itself, was gone. I was unmoored, alone in a place where every familiar sound had been erased. The fog shifted with my steps, curling around my knees, my waist. I felt it slide over my arms, soft, cold, like a living thing. Branches pressed close but made no sound. The earth was soft underfoot, yet the usual textures, dry leaves, roots, were muted. The world was reduced to shapes and shadows, to damp air on my skin and the weight of the silence. I stumbled over a hidden root. No snap, no crackle. Only the fog moving, breathing, hugging me tighter. The silence seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. I imagined it reaching for me, thick, patient, like the forest was aware of every breath I drew. I stopped again, listening. Nothing. The fog was pale light turned gray, shadows bending in corners of my eyes. I could smell damp wood, wet leaves, and a hint of something older, something buried beneath soil, something waiting. The thicket didn't end. It pressed in from all sides. I felt each branch as if it were a hand, soft, cold, alive. The silence enveloped me completely, a living, breathing entity. No rustle, no whisper. Only me, and the weight of the forest holding its breath. I moved forward once more, each step tentative, careful. The fog swirled with me, and for a moment I thought I saw shapes shifting within the gray. But the instant I focused, they dissolved. The thicket remained, silent and patient, and I realized it would not let me make a sound. I walked on, the fog and silence pressing close, each step swallowed before it landed. The forest waited, and I, trapped in its quiet embrace, could only move and breathe and listen. The forest seemed heavier tonight. The fog lay low, curling around gnarled roots and darkened trunks. The air smelled damp, earthy, sharp with decay. I moved slowly, my feet soft against the moss. Every snap of a twig would have screamed in normal silence. But here, there was only the feeling of being watched. And then I saw them. Eyes, pale, unblinking from the shadows. They hovered just beyond my vision. When I turned to focus, they disappeared. A flicker, gone like smoke over cold stone. I could feel them following me. Not a person, not something human, but the forest itself. The trunks and branches seemed to lean inward, their forms warped in the dim light, as if creating vantage points just for those eyes. A rustle above me. A branch shifted, though the wind was still. The eyes blinked in unison with some silent pulse I could not name. I stopped. Held my breath. The fog moved, curling against my skin, soft, wet, and impossibly cold. Every step I took, they moved. Across hollows, behind trunks, between roots. They blinked, sometimes slowly, deliberately, sometimes staring endlessly, and I knew it wasn't waiting for me to flee. It was waiting for me to notice. I tried to listen. My own heartbeat roared in my ears. The forest offered no reply, only silence heavy as stone. A faint hum lingered in the fog, like the ground itself was vibrating softly. I reached for a branch to steady myself. The bark was slick with moisture. Even as I touched it, I felt eyes upon my fingers, watching, measuring. I could not tell where I ended and the forest began. The fog thickened. Pale light glimmered off wet leaves, and within it the eyes multiplied. They were everywhere, peeking from under roots, glimmering between brambles, vanishing only to appear moments later. Some blinked. Some never did. I wanted to move faster. But every step felt mirrored. Like the forest anticipated my motion, like it knew the exact moment I would hesitate. My chest tightened. The air was heavier, harder to draw in. Every inhale felt observed. A twig snapped behind me. I whipped around. Nothing. Yet the eyes persisted. Closer now. They seemed to drift toward me, weightless, silent, and I realized they were not fixed in the trees. They were floating in the fog, following my every movement, judging, patient, unrelenting. I tried to blink, to reset the world, but the eyes remained, etched into the mist, faint but unmistakable. Some stared from angles my head could not reach, from heights I could not climb. The forest had no corners where they were not. The silence grew heavier still. I could hear nothing but my breath, shallow, quick, damp in the cold air. Each step I took became tentative, measured, as if moving too fast would awaken some latent will lurking in the mist. I sensed them in the ground now. Beneath the moss, in the soil, watching the soles of my feet, following my rhythm, every heartbeat mirrored in their unseen presence, a flicker of movement, just at the corner of my eye. I turned sharply. Nothing but fog, and yet I knew the eyes were there. They had never left. I breathed slowly, trying to calm the terror, but the forest had no mercy. It pressed closer, shadowed shapes bending and stretching, fog curling like fingers around me. I could not see the edges of the thicket. I could not escape their gaze, I whispered to myself, barely audible. The sound was swallowed instantly. Even my voice could not break the stillness. The eyes did not blink. They waited, and I moved on, each step trembling, each glance met by nothing, and yet by everything. The forest's breath was cold against my neck. The fog clung to my skin. The eyes followed, always following, silent, unblinking, eternal. The trees ended abruptly. A circle of bare earth lay before me, fog curling low over the ground. No roots, no branches, only the pulse beneath my feet. It felt alive. The soil trembled faintly with each step, soft, almost imperceptible. I stopped, listened. Nothing moved above, yet the air was thick with attention. A cold breath slid over my neck. The fog swirled, denser now, shaping itself into shadows that seemed to lean closer, expecting me to make a move. Every inhale I drew tasted damp and earthy, clinging to my throat. I stepped forward, tentative. The clearing seemed to respond, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. I could feel something beneath me, just out of sight, watching patiently. The silence was heavier than any sound, pressing into my chest like water. Shadows shifted along the edges of the fog. I caught glimpses of shapes curling and retreating, indistinct, yet deliberate. Nothing human, yet somehow aware. I felt their gaze without seeing faces. The air smelled of wet leaves and decay, the sharp tang of moss mixing with cold stone. I knelt, brushing my fingers over the bare earth. It was soft, almost yielding, but beneath that softness, I sensed a tension, a readiness to spring into being. I breathed slowly, but even the act of breathing felt intrusive. The clearing held its quiet, patient expectation. My footsteps echoed softly against unseen boundaries, and I realized the circle was larger than it appeared, edges blurred, bending with the fog. The ground beneath my heels seemed to shift slightly with each step. A faint hum rose from the soil, a vibration that reached through the soles of my feet. It was subtle, almost polite, but unmistakable. The pulse of the clearing matched it perfectly. I could not move without noticing it. I stood, feeling the fog brush against my skin, cool and damp, clinging in fine threads. Shadows flickered at the corner of my vision, leaning closer, waiting. I could almost sense their breath mingling with mine, but when I turned, nothing remained. The air grew heavier, scented with cold earth and something faintly metallic. I traced the edge of the clearing with my gaze. Shapes seemed to retreat as I looked, then reappear elsewhere, ghostly and patient. The fog made them familiar, then unfamiliar again. A whisper rose from beneath the soil, so soft I could not tell if I imagined it. It wound around my ankles, crawling upward, a touch both tender and terrifying. I froze. The clearing waited, expectant, deliberate. Every instinct urged me to move, but every step seemed to echo against unseen walls. I crouched, brushing dirt from my palms. The pulse beneath me seemed to respond, slowing when I slowed, quivering when I trembled. I felt watched from every angle, but there was no form, no eyes, no body, only presence. The fog shifted again, revealing brief glimpses of shapes curling inside itself. They were quiet, patient, vanishing when I blinked. I could sense them all around me, suspended in anticipation. I rose slowly, each movement careful, deliberate. The pulse beneath my feet grew stronger, a faint rhythm echoing inside my chest. The fog clung to my arms and the cold pressed into my bones. I could not see the edges of the clearing, but I could feel them, feel the expectation it held. I breathed shallow, careful not to disturb the silence. Every sound I made seemed magnified, yet still the clearing did not move. It waited, and I felt its attention, soft and patient, an unseen heartbeat in the fog. I stepped to the center, bare feet pressing into the pulsing earth. The fog swirled around me, shapes shifting and leaning closer but never touching. I could feel their watchfulness, the expectation, the quiet patience of something ancient. And for a moment I thought I understood. The clearing did not demand. It waited, and I could not leave. The fog lay thick across the forest floor, cold and damp, curling around my ankles, clinging like fingers. The last pale light of dusk faded, leaving the trees in soft silhouettes. Then I noticed it, a low hum, faint, distant, almost beneath hearing. It rose slowly, growing without haste, stretching through the fog, through the soil, through my bones. The air seemed to vibrate. Each breath I drew shivered in my chest. I stopped walking, paused, listening. The fog pulsed with it, rippling along the earth like waves. Shadows moved at the edges of my vision, leaning slightly, following the hum. Branches trembled, though no wind stirred. It was everywhere, yet nowhere. A presence threaded through the forest, patient and deep. The sound rose steadily, dulling everything else. The rustle of leaves, the drip of condensation, even my own heartbeat faded beneath it. I felt hollowed, pulled into its rhythm. The fog shifted around my legs, soft and wet, curling like smoke. I shivered as it brushed against my skin, cooling, intimate, unsettling. Shapes emerged briefly, shadowed forms in the mist, leaning toward me, then fading like breath on glass. The forest itself seemed to breathe with the hum. A subtle rise and fall beneath the earth, through roots and stone, lifting and falling with patient cadence. I stepped forward and the fog rippled beneath my feet. Every movement I made echoed through the pulse, synchronous, impossible to escape. I could feel it in my bones. A vibration that was soft but insistent, anchoring itself to me. It pressed into my chest, and I realized I could no longer distinguish where the forest ended and I began. A shadow passed across the fog, long, stretched, almost human in form. It paused, hovering near, then dissolved into the mist. I blinked, and it was gone. Only the hum remained, steady, patient, breathing with the fog itself. I crouched, placing a hand against the damp soil. It throbbed lightly under my touch, synchronized with the distant hum. I could feel it moving beneath me, through the ground, through the fog, wrapping me in the forest's rhythm. I breathed carefully. Even inhalation felt loud against the quiet. Yet the hum swallowed it, folding every sound into itself. The fog thickened, dense and curling, pressing closer to my face. I could taste the damp earth, the chill, and something metallic, faint, lingering in the cold. The hum shifted slightly, modulating, a subtle wave that sent shivers up my spine. Shadows moved along the periphery again, leaning, watching, absorbed into the vibration. I wanted to speak, to break the silence, but my voice felt foreign, like it would shatter the pulse. Step by step, I moved forward. The fog slid around my legs, soft and yielding, yet I felt its weight in every fiber. The hum grew, stretching from the edges of hearing to a resonance deep inside. I could no longer tell where it began or where it ended. I stopped. And in that stillness, the forest seemed to hold me in place. The hum pulsed through my body. A living thing, patient, silent, expectant. It was not threatening, but it demanded attention, and I could not look away. Shadows flickered closer in the fog, leaning without touching, wrapping themselves around the vibration. I felt the hum press against my spine, against my limbs, pulling me into its rhythm. Every part of me was aware, yet alone. I exhaled slowly, letting the fog curl around my mouth. The hum continued, steady, an endless pulse, the forest's heartbeat made audible. I could sense it everywhere, under my feet, through the fog, within me, and then I understood. I was part of it now, and it would not let me leave. The hum stretched on, infinite, the forest breathing, watching, patient. I could only listen. I could only feel. Twilight slipped away too quickly. The last glow clung to the fog, thin and trembling. Shadows pooled beneath the trees, stretching long, stretching cold. I reached for my flashlight, fingers trembling. The metal was cold, heavy in my hand. I clicked it on. A flicker. Then darkness. The forest swallowed everything. The faint glow vanished. The fog thickened, curling, pressing against my skin. Every breath I drew was loud, every heartbeat loud, echoing in the stillness. Shadows moved differently now. Not just shapes, but flowing, sliding between the trunks, leaning closer, alive in the dimness. I thought I saw one tilt its head, watching. The ground was soft beneath my boots, wet with condensation. Every step made the fog shiver like a whisper beneath my soles. I froze, and the fog froze with me. Soft rustlings, almost imperceptible, traveled through the mist. I tried the flashlight again. Flicker. A brief pale cone of light. Then gone. Darkness reasserted itself, dense and heavy. The air carried a cold scent, like wet moss and iron, and beneath it, a faint hum of something alive coiled in the trees. Wrapping around the roots, I took a step forward. The shadows shifted with me. Step by step, they flowed along the fog. I spun around. No one there. But the movement lingered. The forest breathed. I breathed. Everything was entwined. A branch scraped softly. Too slow, deliberate. Not a breeze. Not a bird. Something deliberate. Watching, waiting. I held my breath. And the shadows leaned closer, curving around the fog, almost tangible. I could hear my own heartbeat now. It rattled inside my chest. I whispered to myself, small sounds that vanished instantly. The flashlight flickered again, a dying pulse of pale light, catching a glint in the mist. A shape? Or just a reflection of wet leaves? I could not tell. Every tree seemed alive. Bark shifted subtly, like veins pulsing under skin. The fog clung to the trunks, licking, curling, and I felt it press against my face. Cool, wet, intrusive. It smelled faintly of decay, soft, almost sweet. I moved forward, slow. The shadows moved with me. The fog thickened at each step, wrapping tighter around my legs. A sound, a soft, hollow sigh. I spun. Nothing. Only the fog. Only the shadows. Only the weight of being utterly alone. The darkness was complete. Even my own hands vanished in it. The hum beneath the fog pulsed gently, like a heart, like a promise. I could not escape its rhythm. It was in the soil, in the air, in me. I tried to call out. A whisper barely formed. The fog swallowed it. The shadows leaned closer. I imagined eyes in the dark, watching, breathing along with me. My flashlight flickered one last time. A thin beam, quivering, caught the edge of a branch. The shadow behind it shifted. And then it was gone. Only darkness remained. Only the fog, curling around my chest, pressing, silent, expectant. I moved. Careful steps, soft, deliberate. The fog moved with me. The shadows moved with me. I could feel them lean closer with each breath. The forest had claimed the light, claimed the edges of vision, claimed me. I was alone, yet not. The shadows lived. The fog lived. The silence was not empty. I stopped. Held my breath, listened. The fog pressed closer. The forest waited. The shadows waited. And I waited with them. The fog hung low, thick and damp, curling around my ankles as I moved. Twilight had faded, leaving only pale streaks of light slipping through the branches. Every step I took was met with silence. No rustle of leaves, no snapping twig, just the soft squish of damp earth beneath my boots. I felt exposed, but the air itself seemed to press close, heavy and expectant. I paused, held my breath. The fog shifted around me, wrapping closer, tickling my skin, pressing against the backs of my legs. I could almost hear it breathe, a faint hum, like a static vibration through the ground. I took another step, then froze. Something followed. The echo of a step, soft, deliberate, matched mine perfectly. I turned my head slowly. Nothing. Only fog, only shadows, only the quiet tension that felt alive. I walked again. Step, step, step. The echo followed. Always behind, always in perfect rhythm. I could feel it in my chest, a tremor, a weight pressing through the fog, waiting for me to falter. The forest seemed to tighten around me. Trees leaned closer, their bark glinting wet in the dim light. The shadows stretched unnaturally, pulsing with each beat of my heart. I breathed, and the fog breathed with me. Every inhale brought it closer. Every exhale made the footsteps sharper, more deliberate. I stopped again, held my breath. The echo stopped too. Silence, thick and suffocating. I felt eyes on me, not human, but present, watching from the folds of shadow and fog. I wanted to turn, to run, but my legs were rooted in wet soil, frozen in anticipation. A twig snapped. Behind me, soft, almost polite. I didn't move. The step repeated. Then another, perfectly aligned with mine, as if the fog itself had learned to mimic me. I could smell it then, a faint trace of damp earth and something older, something colder than the night air. It pressed against my skin, slid along my shoulders, slithering, intimate. I swallowed hard. The echo followed. I moved forward, slowly, deliberately. The forest watching every careful motion. Step, step, step. The echo was patient, measured like it had all the time in the world. I glanced at the ground. My own footprints were deep, wet impressions in the earth. Beside each one, another print, small, perfectly shaped. Following, always following. I could not escape it. The fog thickened, coiling around my legs, licking my hands, pressing against my face. The sound of my own heartbeat was loud, echoing off invisible walls of mist. I reached forward to steady myself against a tree. The echo of my step followed again. Closer now. Intentional, I whispered. Just a thread of sound, my voice almost lost in the fog. The echo mimicked nothing of it, but the space behind me shifted. A pulse, a presence bending toward me, leaning through the mist. I turned abruptly. Empty air, nothing but fog, nothing but shadow. The footsteps stopped for a heartbeat, then resumed. Closer. I could feel it in the ground beneath me, in the hairs on my arms, in the damp press of fog against my neck. Every motion I made was mirrored. Every hesitation echoed. Step, step, step. I could no longer tell which was mine, which was not. The presence behind me was patient, watching, knowing I could not flee. I moved again. The forest held its breath. The fog held its shape. The shadows leaned forward. Step, step, step. And then, at last, the echo stopped. A silence so complete that my ears rang. I dared a glance behind me. The fog was empty. The prints were gone, yet the weight remained. Heavy in the chest, pressing against my skin. A presence that lingered even without footsteps, even without shape. I breathed, softly, slowly. The fog swirled and shifted, curling around my legs, around my shoulders, whispering in a language I almost recognized. Alone, yet not alone. I stepped forward once more. The forest waited. The fog waited. And I moved into it, carrying the last step with me. The forest thinned at first, then closed in again, fog spilling low and thick between the trunks. The air was cold, damp, pressing against my skin, curling around my arms and legs. Each step was muffled, soft against the wet soil. I could see my shadow for a moment. Then it vanished, swallowed by the creeping whiteness. The path disappeared beneath the fog, and the trees became pale, shifting shapes, their edges blurring into nothing. I slowed, listening. The wind had gone. Even the hum of the forest seemed to settle into a quiet, as though holding its breath with me. The fog throbbed gently, pulsing through the ground, through the air, through the bones in my chest. Shapes moved at the corner of my vision. A branch, a shadow, something else I could not name. They dissolved the moment I looked directly. A presence lingered. Not pressing, not urgent, but patient, watching, folded into the mist around me. The fog rose to my knees, then my waist. It wrapped me, soft and intimate, a cold embrace that pressed lightly, as if the forest wanted nothing more than to hold me here. I could no longer tell where I ended and the forest began. I breathed. The fog seemed to answer, curling tighter, sliding along my arms and back. It smelled of wet earth, of something older, older than memory, older than thought. Each inhale carried it deeper, filling my chest with calm, a strange surrender that felt inevitable. I let my hands brush through it. It parted, then returned, a soft, living texture, cold and gentle. I felt small particles cling to my skin, a whisper of moss, a faint taste of soil. The forest was not cruel here. It was quiet, patient, watching without judgment. I stopped moving. The fog rolled around my feet, then to my knees, then up past my shoulders. It closed in completely, and the world shrank to mist, to damp air, to the gentle pulse beneath me. I could not see my hands or my boots, or the soft rise and fall of the ground. I listened. No rustle, no footstep, only the steady thrum of life hidden deep within the fog. I felt it in my chest, in my lungs, a resonance that matched my own heartbeat. It was patient. It was waiting. I felt I could wait too. I let myself sink into the fog, letting it fold around me, curl around my legs and waist, slide across my shoulders. I could no longer tell if I was moving or standing still. The forest was both, and I was both. I exhaled, and the mist swallowed it, a quiet answer to the last sound I had made. The fog pressed against my face, soft, moist, and I tasted nothing but damp air and earth older than memory. It filled my ears with the hum of quiet, the slow rhythm of time that had no beginning, no end. I could not tell where I began or where I ended. I thought of turning back, of retracing steps that no longer existed. But there was no path, no footprints, only fog and the slow, calm throb beneath my feet. It was easier not to move, easier to let the fog carry me where it willed. I let my arms fall to my sides. The mist lingered there, sliding over skin, coiling softly around my fingers. I could feel it move, but it did not push. It held me, like a presence waiting patiently for something I could not name, something I had almost forgotten. And in that waiting, I surrendered. No fear, no question, only the fog and the subtle heartbeat beneath the earth. I exhaled again, slow and steady, letting the mist fold fully around me, closing the last distance between the forest and my own self. I was alone, yet not alone. The fog was a cradle, a gentle hand guiding me into the unseen. I had no path, no shadow, no certainty, only the embrace of the forest and the quiet knowledge that some things are meant to remain unseen. I stood there, and the fog wrapped me completely. It shimmered faintly in pale light, but I could not see it. I could only feel it, pressing close, patient, eternal, and finally I was at rest.